So last week, I spoke with Dr. Ava Rubin about Chinese medicine and acupuncture and her extraordinary partnership with Pete Coles. And today, you get to meet him. Pete is a transpersonal psychotherapist who uses somatics to help you listen in an embodied way and observe your internal narratives with curiosity and compassion to understand how they affect your perceptions and behavior. He has an extensive background in working with drug and alcohol addiction in diverse communities, so he has a unique understanding of mental health and trauma. And when you sit in a room with him, you just feel safe to explore the sharp edges of your experiences. He is helping me feel less overwhelmed by my emotions and the harshness of the world, particularly in the climate right now. And his insights into relationship dynamics and conflict resolution challenge me, open my heart, and shift the way I see and relate to others. Oh, this man is special and he moves you. So stop what you're doing and get cozy because you're going to want to lean in for this one. I'm excited for you to experience it. So let's get the skinny from Pete Coles. Oh, Pete, I'm so excited to talk to you about exploring identity and relationship with self and all the great stuff. So I want to ask you about your "it has to be me" moment where you decided to go into counseling. Like, where did that come from?
Huh. Um, I think that it's. I remember it's something that I've done all my life, and it's and then to make it a profession um, was it was probably coming off a career of music really, and loving being a musician, but it's a colorful life being a musician, and it probably doesn't, for the majority of people, support a family and um, stabilize a grounded life. So, yeah, transitioning out of the arts scene to seek more stability, I think, and that kind of pushed me into yeah, knowing that I a lot of people would come and talk to me and confine, and that was something I think that came from my father as well. And so, yeah, it kind of felt like a pretty natural progression to go study that. And as soon as I was studying it, I just love it. I love psychology and philosophy and theology. Yeah, exploring the psyche, exploring people essentially, and I've just gobbled it up all my life really, and just fascinated in how we work and how to do relationships and so forth. So yeah. Once I started studying it, it felt just so natural to to move into the profession, and that coming from the music scene, it felt quite natural to move towards drug and alcohol work. That being rife in the music scene, partly because a lot of venues, especially for music, pay you in alcohol, which is
Yes.
is a great thing for financial stability. um, so yeah, that felt like a natural place to start exploring how to assist people on drug and alcohol dependency, and that moved into more generalized support and assistance and relationships support as well. And I just love it. I love it. I love um, exploring and helping to make meaning and care for, or to observe and to explore people's stories, and to see where some of the narratives in which in how they're translating the world around them, and also how they're seeing themselves start to be influenced by grief and hurt and pain, and overwhelm. And those
Mm.
forces do start to write stories, and that can really influence relationship with self, relationship with others, and relationship with the world in general. And yeah,
Yeah. So I want to ask you about this work that you did in your 20s with adolescents and young people as a young person dealing with addiction. And you were talking about, one of the foundations of your work is building trust and creating safe spaces for people to be able to explore themselves with curiosity. What did you learn in terms of forming those connections and that trust with people that are inherently distrustful, or addicts that are actively seeking disconnection or wanting to escape connection, if that's the right way to say it? How did that inform how has that informed your further work as you move through your career?
I love that question. Um, with working in withdrawal units, a lot of the kids there are coming from families and environments in which there has been massive breaches of trust, and
Mm.
the to to try to develop a relationship with that person, trust you, is primarily, well, you need to be authentic, and their, excuse the language, but their bullshit meter is like at 10. Most
Yeah.
of those kids can tell when someone's not being authentic, when they're trying too hard, when they're trying to connect, um, and that so their awareness of, in some ways, danger is very, very high, and so your any performance will be picked up immediately. So you're
Mm.
you train in trying to genuinely connect, and to let them come to you, essentially, and to not try to fix them, um, primarily as well.
Mm.
Often that environment and those cultures are sick and tired of people trying to help, and fix them, and so the place of authentic connection, where you're reaching out as a human and trying to trying to find a place where they want to connect, and you're not that your ulterior motives, in some ways, have to be dropped, and the primary um, um, way of relating is finding genuine interest in subjects and so forth, that perhaps have no need to teach and to learn, to teach and to provide assistance. And once that's established, relationship that is based on trust tends to heal, anyway. Genuine relationships are
Mm.
healthy for us. They're nurturing, they're medicine to the soul. We relax when we're around that type of environment. And especially for people who have lived in environments where breaches of trust are constant, to have authentic relationships where there is nothing um, expected of them, or there's no hidden agenda, is very nurturing. And yeah, once you have that, that in itself is, that builds a lot of, it can be a part of a story where it shows that there are decent people in the world, and Often
Mm.
those kids, that's what they don't see a lot of people that are genuinely trying to meet them.
Yeah. And while you were genuinely meeting them as a man in your 20s, how did that vicarious trauma affect you and then lead you into the next iteration of your career,
Mm.
into the somatic practices
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
transpersonal part of
yeah,
your work?
yeah. I think if um, I think if you're going to be a person of service, you're on a collision course with the the overwhelming harshness of the world. And
Mm.
if you are if you see that to a certain level, it should shock you. It should knock you off your feet. There should be a period of integration. Um, and as a young worker going in, you try to normalize it and to make sense of it intellectually, and it it affects you to the core of your soul and physically as well. And I think a lot of people of service don't necessarily integrate it very well. Um, and yeah, so vicarious trauma is often a symptom of seeing case after case after case of terrible things. And you can rationalize it to say that that's your job, but it slowly over a period of time really changes you. And then at some point, unless you have very, very strong mentors and really good practices, it drives you on a collision course with your own pain and suffering. And if that's not integrated, and um, yeah, it can it can you can put up walls that allow you to keep working, but um, it can influence your relationship with, well, not only the people that you're working with of service, but in your entire life. It can harden you if we're not careful, and we can be overwhelmed by the atrocities of life. Um, and so, yeah,
So, how did you
that's
integrate it?
well. I think most people should have at least one breakdown. If they're uh, so, yeah, poorly, I would say, but perhaps naturally and normally, you have you realize that you're not sleeping anymore, and a lot of in my day, I'm not sure how it is. I've been out of the public industry for a while now, but a lot of people medicate, and whether that's pharmaceutical based or alcohol or so forth, that's very common, or they try to deal with it any way they can in some ways. And for me, my sleep became really poor. I became more irritable. Uh, uh, my partner Ava picked up on the fact that there was a problem before I did, and at some point I needed to take a break and to integrate some of the experiences that I had had, as opposed to just keep on moving and keeping on working. And for me, that was literally, which was perhaps an extreme way of doing it, but I went walking for 6 weeks in Tasmania, and with a gentleman, and periods by myself. And I walked it out. I literally walked 600 k's, and that's a lot of time
Wow.
to think and to make sense, and to yeah uh, to sit with self, in the bush and in
Mm.
nature. And that facilitated the beginning of many changes. One was a period out and then moving into education and teaching. And then that moved into looking at transpersonal therapy and coming into private practice a bit later than that. And I feel like I'd matured and come to terms with perhaps more maturely the overwhelm of the work that we choose. And each person has to find practices of integration and normalization. Well, the danger of it when you're working with a lot of trauma is that you start to see the world through that trauma. You start to feel that that's everywhere, and it can really influence how you see things in your own life. And for instance, for me, I don't think it was even conscious until I met a group of 18-year-olds who were very well put together, very grounded, very well parented and cared for. And when I was in dialogue with them, it occurred to me that I hadn't had a conversation with a young person for years that was put together. All of my conversations were with people that I worked with, of people that had been through just horrible, horrible things, and it was very healing to to have conversations with young people who were just brilliant, and had a well-rounded individuals. And if you'd asked me intellectually, I would have known that. But when that is your experience day in, day out, there's something else that occurs that's hard to kind of put into words around how you see the world, even if your intellect can kind of rationalize yourself away from it. I'm not sure if that quite makes sense.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. No, it absolutely resonates with me. I want to ask you about this knowing that we typically hold in our intellect, and the knowing that comes with embodiment. And when the magic that happens when we bring that together, and the trust, and the listening. So that path that you've just been taking us on, just a little bit about your integration of listening and holding the world and relationship with self and others in a different way. How has somatic work and practices and body listening informed the way that you have re-entered your path of service and holding space for others and helping shepherd them in their curiosity of themselves and the world?
Yeah, I love that. I think you said it really well. Body listening, and to listen with the whole of our being, our mind and body, is something that for the most of us takes training, and that the intellect for many of us has kind of taken over the throne, and we're not aware that there is a bodily experience that helps to ground us. And when that's activated, when that's being brought online more consciously, as largely most of the body is run on autopilot, unconscious mechanisms moving with it. And that's the power of breath, is that breath happens naturally and instinctually, and it doesn't require awareness. But when we participate in those processes, we bring a gentle, subtle awareness to larger parts of ourselves, and that we're not just hearing intellectually, or that we're here. We can participate far more with embodiment, And when you start to work with that, there's a there's a subtle state change that occurs for most people. And the more we do that, the more we realize when we're not engaged in the body, and that it changes how we interact with the world. It changes. We're less likely to notice that we've lost a little bit of presence, or our anxiety is perhaps meaning that our capacity to focus on the dialogue or the conversation is influencing it, or there's a level of agitation that we're playing out as opposed to being able to assist. And that's the benefit of somatics. Somatics helps us to be in relationship with noticing when we're perhaps compromised, when we're agitated, when we're translating the world through a restrictive emotion that may be influencing how we're relating with the world at that moment. And that, the body is always talking to us. And often, it can be uncomfortable in some ways to be in relationship with it, because there is agitation in the system, and there is anxiety, and there is a nervousness that can present itself, and in what we would say an urgency or a need to move on, or and so forth. So I think somatics is becoming a far more accepted part of therapy in general.
Yes.
And a lot of people get a lot of benefit from it, and that the basis of it, you could say, is that there needs to be a conscious participation with assisting our muscles, assisting our breath to deepen. Agitation, anxiety, overwhelm. Often a symptom of that is a shallow breath. Over analysis, it can also be related to shallow breathing. Thought process, intrusive thoughts, often an element of that is shallow breathing, and bringing more oxygen into the system really can help to soothe the body. And when the body soothes and it relaxes, and when it relaxes, it tends to stop producing cortisol to the same levels, and adrenaline and neuroperipherin and so forth. And it's a beautiful
Yeah.
practice.
It's a beautiful practice, and somatic practices and breath work has absolutely changed my life. When you're working one to one with someone and you meet them for the first time, I know most of the people that you work with come through referrals. So there is that intellectual trust of, I've heard that you're amazing. My friend said you changed their life, or whatever it might be. But then when you sit in a room in relationship with someone with your whole being, you've got to develop that language together of
Yeah.
trust and build that up. So, uh, are you principally observing somebody's body as a practitioner, and those signs you were just talking about that would indicate that there has been a loss of trust, or it hasn't been established yet? How are you listening? The reason I ask you this is for several reasons, but I was just thinking about how we can be taking some of what you do as a therapist and just listening in a different way when we're in relationship with other people, listening to our body and our breath as we're responding to something they're saying, or observing how they're receiving what we're putting out there.
It, it would be, I would imagine that you and people that listen to this will have been in a circumstance or a situation where they've asked someone if they're okay, or if they're irritated, or they've noticed that something's not quite right by the observation of perhaps how they're moving, or how their body is, or there's a certain tone in their voice, and that the the person that they've asked has told them that they're fine, they're okay, that and so there's an intuition or an observation that something's a bit off, but when they've gone to reality check with that person, it's they've communicated that that's not the case. And so when you're in a session, people can tell you that they trust or they're ready to talk about something, or they're happy to explore childhood things, and so their words are saying one thing, but their body is not necessarily saying that at all, and that sometimes before we've established trust, we go over our own boundaries, and that causes yeah, so that can cause anxiety afterwards, and thought processes afterwards around what has been shared, and insecurities and perhaps paranoias and all sorts of things. And so the when we when our relationship with our body is maturing, is still in is disconnected from time to time, we can sometimes not respect the fact that it's not ready. And so as a practitioner, you're not just listening to the words, you're attempting to watch how the person is as a whole, and at times that means that you may slow down the session. You may acknowledge that that's a direction that we can go, but perhaps we could take it slowly and explore around the edges of things, and see if we can create a trust in the relationship more, and a softening in the room. And so I think that's another really positive thing about somatics. And when we're consciously participating in with our body, is that we can notice when there's agitation and fear or overwhelm. In
I
some
want to
ways
ask you
we're
about
taught
this.
to move away from that.
Yes. Oh, we're so in simpatico here, because I was just about to ask you about this relationship with ease and the relationship with tension, or, dis-ease, and how we're just hardwired to be seeking ease at all times and exiling dis-ease or tension or whatever, and judging so-called negative emotions like grief, anxiety, depression, sadness, dissatisfaction, anger, whatever it might be. And I know this is a really big part of your work about reframing, or I don't even know if that's the word that you would use, but looking at our relationship with the narratives, that might be convenient or inconvenient. So I just want to ask you about how you see that, though, holding all of the emotions and thoughts that are moving through our body, and being able to sit with them in a place of curiosity rather than judgment or shame.
Yeah, the way that the language I use is that we want to, acknowledge these more difficult emotions, and give them a seat at the table, and acknowledge that they're probably not going anywhere. And so trying to be in more intimacy with them is probably our best way through. A lot of people come into the room talking about thought processes or discomfort in which they're hoping they can get rid of, as opposed to moving into more intimacy, more curiosity, giving them here's an example of it. So perhaps someone who suffers from anxiety is going to a party, and they're, they're, they know that every once in a while their anxiety settles and they have a good night, but sometimes their anxiety comes into the point where it creates a verbal paralysis. They really struggle to meet people, to converse, and to talk with relaxation. And as they're preparing for the party, they're just really hoping their anxiety is not going to be there. And they're getting really worried that it may be there when they turn up to the party. And when it starts to show itself when they're walking in, there's a part of their brain that's going, oh God, oh God, oh God. I'm really stressing out because I can feel what my body's doing and it's overwhelming and I'm not going to be able to cope. And so they've got to the party and they realize that anxiety's come with them and is at the party. And another approach to that is to accept the fact that there's a really good chance that anxiety will be there with them, and that that's okay, and that and to be more curious around that, more understanding of how it moves through their body, and to inquire deeper into how that relationship affects them and is with them, and to give it more time, more space in some ways, which is counter to what people desire. And when there's a familiarity, the way and acceptance of the state in which it presents itself from time to time, that familiarity, that acceptance, that knowledge of that information can help to change the nature of that relationship, as opposed to just hoping that that part of them won't turn up. And so there is an acceptance that it will be part of the experience, and with that acceptance, that relationship can move quite can move quite a lot, really, in how it presents itself when there's when there's an acceptance that perhaps it's part of the landscape in which is you. The fear of
Yeah,
it
and
creates
beyond
more anxiety.
and beyond acceptance, one of your superpowers is helping people see that these states can be sacred and that they help to activate change
Mm,
and lead to greater understanding and awareness. So I know that you work a lot with grief.
mm.
Can you share your perspective about that? Because I find it really fascinating how you say that it's meticulous in its work with us. It's
Mm,
a really beautiful way of looking at it,
mm,
and welcoming it and inviting that state to be a part of the conversation and where it can lead you.
mm. I'm gonna move into this question from a particular angle, and we'll see where we end up.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
so one of the ways in which we um, looked at um, big changes in life were rites of passage in many different cultures. And one way of looking at rites of passage is that they're not a human-made phenomenon, which you can do that. You can create ceremonies around rites of passage to create a level of tension and overwhelm that shows the person that they're more capable than what they thought. And that's what a rite of passage does to some extent, is it pushes you beyond what you think that you're capable of and puts you in a place where you're essentially in a state of emergency, where you see
Mm,
that there's a deeper strength. There's potential for you to for you to cope with things that perhaps you didn't realize that you could. Um, natural rite of passages present themselves. Like one is, which is inevitable for all of us, is a relationship with death and grief. And grief removes things that we believe is fundamental to our state of happiness or stability. And when a culture doesn't necessarily have the support mechanisms to really support these rites of passage, people can get really, really lost in these places, understandably, and overwhelmed to the point where it's hard to heal from and integrate. Um, but and grief is well, yeah, it's exactly that. It's a place of um, we where you can't fix it. Something's been lost, and there's no solving it around it. It's integrating into a new world. It's a loss of whatever it is that has passed, and it's also a death of ourself within the landscape um, of our world, and that the world has fundamentally changed forever. And while we're in the depths of that, there's deep struggles. From a symbolic point of view, we would say it would be a journey into the underworld, and
Hmm.
and it's hard. We will have a series of thought processes. We'll try to intellectualize our way through it. We'll try to, as psyche, especially when it's in shock, if something's happened that has really taken us by surprise, we can seek realities internally where that didn't happen. We don't want it to be true, and psyche can try to establish reality without acknowledging or accepting the reality that's taking place, and that can create a lot of overwhelm and confusion. And it can be a very, very symbolic place. Meaning making can appear everywhere. We can notice, nature can present meaning all around us, especially during those early days of shock and grief. And so the way the mind processes things is a state change in itself. And yeah, so it's a very, very powerful experience. And yeah, again, the modern world sometimes doesn't have the types of support that really helps to nurture those very powerful state changes. Um, and then over time, yeah, if we do create solid meaning, then we come out the other side profoundly different. And that sacred
Mm.
places tend to be overwhelming. Sacred spaces are not
Yes.
loving always and beautiful. They stretch us and crack us, They break us, but they break us open, not broken. And it's a
Mm.
different thing. But there is a sense of being broken, but the break allows for us to understand more and to grow potentially. Christina Pinkola Estes would say, that a wound can become a scar, and a scar is a symbol of meaning, and that something is healed, and that scarring, the tissue is actually stronger. You've been changed forever, where a wound is still festering; it hasn't been able to, to heal, and that scars are often a symbol of a circumstance in which growth has happened, and it's a sign of wisdom traditionally in many cultures. Um, um, and that wisdom is based basically that this person has been some places, right? They've been
Yeah.
broken open, they've been stretched. And, some rites of passage, some griefs are very hard to come back from. Yeah,
Yeah.
life
I want to
can
ask you,
basically really intense situations.
yeah. Yeah, I want to ask you about what you were talking about before. You were talking about our internal landscape. um, our garden and helping people sow their internal landscape and the stories or narratives. You call it your myths, the
Mm,
stories that we tell ourselves and that we keep telling ourselves, and how we can change the stories that are dominating, our two consciousnesses. Um, Talk to me a little bit more about that, about how you help people navigate that journey of that sense of identity and that formation of it or deconstruction of it. Um, I just find your approach really interesting about it. It's always about the I'm a person that does this, I, and that once we are able to observe ourselves in a different way with curiosity, that we can expand the dialogue with which we use to interact with ourselves,
mm. Yeah, I'll take it from this place. I
or the
remember us talking
language.
about, yeah, I remember us talking a little bit about this in the lead up um, interview. Um, the stories are very helpful to make sense of the world. This is why we love them, and that uh, so you can be talking about one thing, but actually you're talking about something deeper, and that really resonates with the human psyche. We love metaphor, we love myth. Um, there's often a visual component, and the visual component mixed with a story can help to make sense of far more subtle parts of ourselves. And one way of looking at it is, well, yeah, there's large parts of our personality that we've inherited essentially, and we all know this. We see parts of ourselves in our mother and our father, and family members and so forth. And um, so you could say, the word I use is genetically inherited personality traits. Um, and when we're coming into relationship with ourselves and we're starting to be curious about our mannerisms and our behaviors and so forth, when we're locked into, I do this and this is how I behave and so forth, we can it can be hard for us to really connect in with just how old some of the personality traits in which we inherited are. Um, and some of them are mischievous, and they cause all sorts of issues with relating in the world. And this is where curiosity around our internal landscape and looking at it as a garden in which we've inherited can be really helpful. The word I use, which is, I suppose it's an Australian Indigenous term in some ways, is custodian. We're a custodian of our own psyche. And the idea around that is that it gives us a little bit of breathing room when we're confronted with the overwhelming situation of trying to make all of these parts of ourself work in relationships and within the world. There's many, many subconscious aspects that cause all sorts of trouble in our lives, and when we're too when we personalize that too much, we're overwhelmed by the situation. I do this. This is my fault, and a custodian takes deep responsibility for who they are. So it's not a way to avoid responsibility, but it gives us a bit of space to understand that the landscape in which we are working with is far older than just us. And that we have an opportunity to tend to our garden and the landscape in which we've inherited, and perhaps improve or to care for some of it and leave it better than when we received it. And my belief is that that's regardless of how we choose to live our life, of whether we become parents or not. There's a yeah that we give back or we pass on all sorts of parts of ourselves that continue to grow and to well, they continue after we've passed in a physical body. That's probably getting into a personal approach, but yeah, there's having a little bit of room, and for instance, how I just spoke there, a lot of it, there's a visual component and a metaphoric component, and that people can make sense of that, even though it's it's not necessarily a completely rational way of looking at things. Stories and contain information that's that can be very powerful to meaning making, and
Yeah.
to see when we've got that space of being able to observe how we are in the world from a little bit more of a distance, without the devastation of guilt of who we are. We can start to really look at some of the stories and some of the patterns that we're participating in from a place of neutrality, and that helps to shift things in ways, especially when there's a somatic aspect to that as well. There's a relaxing that takes place, judgment, that's looking internally. When the critic, you could say, the inner critic is looking at our own behavior, it tends to punish. And that punishment creates rigidity in the body. It creates more tension. And when things are in tension, they even though we see what we're doing, because there's so much judgment in it and so much tension, it's hard for that information to move on and to shift and change. When we intellectually understand something, it by no means means that we change that behavior. And that's a very common thing that people say. It's like, I know what I'm doing. I can see that I'm doing it, and I'm still doing it. Why? And the more that takes place, the more this internal criticism takes place, and this and it can really start to weigh on how we see ourselves as a person in the world. And at some points, that our internal dialogue can become very, very violent if we're not careful.
Yeah. I want to ask you about this internal versus external. We've been talking a lot about relationship with self and how that impacts, our internal conversation with the various parts of ourselves and how we hold ourselves. I want to ask you about how your work with couples has informed all of this and vice versa. Gosh, what's it like sitting with a couple that's navigating and holding their internal versus external? When you're talking about this judgment that we have of ourselves, when we're in relationship, we can really project what happens when my stories and your stories collide. We're talking about that personal responsibility thing. For me, and you're going to say this so much more eloquently than I ever could, but for me, when I'm in relationship of any kind, personal responsibility, I want to take responsibility for my shit. I would like you to take responsibility for your shit. And then I would like to take joint responsibility for what happens when your shit and my shit collide in any form, right? So what's that like for you? We talked about building trust one-on-one when you're sitting in a room full of stories, internal and external. What is that like for you?
Yeah, beautifully said. And also, that's it. You're sitting in a room that's full of stories, and when stories in relationship mesh, it can become very, very confusing, and we don't know where ours starts and theirs begins, and so forth. And the
Yeah.
issue with the fact that when we have a collision of stories, it's often a collision with past. And sometimes my sense is that past is far older than we think. And so from a body point of view, a part of your body is having a type of memory. It's a way of looking at it, and we could expand on that far more. A type of memory, which means that the body has been activated from an experience or something in the past that is now transposing over the future or into the present. And so there where translating the present moment from a past upheaval, and that influences how we're translating what the person in front of us is saying. And then the issue with a relationship is that that can also activate something in the other person. So now they're both translating what's going on from these hurt bodies as well, and so there can be this a real miss. And when that's been going on for some time, and when both people haven't been able to make sense of, which is most of us, it's a relationship work, and being in a relationship for all of us, it's just so deep and brings up so much to the surface. And and by the time people get into couples counselling, often there's just been so much hurt that's taken place, and such confusion that it can be a process, shifting through and making sense of these stories and seeing where there's been a mistranslation, and also caring for the body experience and being able to. People can get used to a certain type of activation and get into patterns of a type of bickering sometimes, and they can acclimatize to it. And so a couple can not be aware of when there's been a state change and they're moving into old patterns. Relationship work, as a therapist, it takes a bit to acclimatize, exactly what you said, because there's just this influx of stories and you're like, whoa. And so there needs to be a lot of grounding, and it does take a bit to be able to sit in that many stories simultaneously, and to soften into it and not be overwhelmed by it. And relationships is interesting. Like, there's a guy called Robert Johnson that believed, he was a Jungian therapist that believed that romanticism quite possibly could be the death of Western civilization. Is that our view of romance really sets a lot of us up for a major fall in expectation of what it is to relate. Where Alain de Botton talked about this as well, but a lot of that, his work came from Robert Johnson in this instance. We meet someone and we're like, oh my God, you're my person. You know how I think and feel. We get along, so to speak, and it's going to be all great because you can read me and I don't need to tell you, because you can just intuitively understand, and it's so yummy, and we've got dopamine and serotonin just like flying everywhere, and we're like, wow, this person's perfect, and we'll tell our friends, this person's just amazing, I can't believe it. And so we're just elevating and elevating and elevating this person into what Robert Johnson calls as a type of deification, right? We're turning them into a non-human. They're perfect, they're amazing, this is the dream. And then, of course, that filter starts to come off them as we, at the beginning of a relationship, we play our best hand. We're trying to be all the best traits and show that person our best hand. And time, we can't hide the fact that there's insecurities and there's parts of us that are less than perfect, and that there's a large proportion of us where we don't understand ourselves, and those parts of our identity start to be seen by each other, and they cause all sorts of issues. And when they start to present themselves, we're quite shocked that we're this beautiful, perfect person has all of these traits, and that fall from grace can be very overwhelming for us. The image of a heart, that's a beautiful image, right? And when you give someone your heart, that image in some ways is incomplete. What's missing from it is the gaping wound that we're handing over, and when we're entering into
Yes.
relationship, I'm handing you access to the places of me in which I hide from the world. I'm letting you see that which is most sacred, that which I'm yet to understand and integrate into my being, that which causes mischief
Mm.
and overwhelm and confusion in my life. And I'm going to let you into those worlds. And you will do the same for me. The most sacred gift that I give to another is actually my trauma, right? My overwhelm, my insecurity, my shyness, my imperfection. That's what I give the person that I choose to be in a deep relationship with. And for most of us, because we haven't really understood that, especially when we're young. Once we start to see those parts of each other, we take that information and we shove it in each other's faces. And for some reason, that causes a problem. Yeah. So,
Yeah. Oh gosh, I could talk to you about this all day long. I'm really interested on a personal level about how you and Ava, as such gifted practitioners, mindfully navigate your personal relationship without pathologizing it. You
uh,
know, because there is so much knowledge and awareness there, and you're carrying so many stories into the room, not only from your personal lives and, you know, the history as we've been talking about, but also these things that you're so fascinated by inside your work with others' journeys, you know, as you shepherd those stories as well. Um, how do you integrate that in a way that is balanced? I'm not sure if that's the right way to ask you that question, but
yeah, I don't know. Like, we do it sometimes well and sometimes not so well. And that yeah, the work that we do as practitioners is one aspect, and then the work that we do, that we give each other, is our humanity. We give ourselves those parts and they cause mischief, and that means there's upheaval and overwhelm sometimes. And within all that, perhaps also the gift of seeing these things we get to sit with so many people. That's a real gift, like
mm,
you're getting snapshots into so many people's lives. And um yeah, like there's many times when I'm working with people in relationships, when they present an issue to the room, and there's a little part of me that's like, yeah, and did you work on that? Or like I can relate to many of the things that are presented in the room, and they'll play out in some way in my personal life as well. And yeah, relating is beautiful and challenging. And yeah, Ava and I do pretty well with it. I think we're a good team. But to be a good team is not the absence of conflict.
mm,
It's stepping back up when there's hurt and seeking repair, and to continue to work on your stuff, and to do your best to own your part in it, and so forth. And yeah, so it's yeah, to be in a healthy relationship, I really believe it's not the absence of conflict. It's
mm,
um, yeah, grounding yourself, and then coming back in, and also trusting that your partner's got something to offer you that's really important, and I certainly, I have a lot of trust in my partner, that there's things that she sees that are an insight into who I am as a person, that if I listen and well, then there's so much wisdom that she's got to help me to be a better person in the world. And I believe that that's reciprocal. She believes that too, and that you have
she does.
an obligation to try to find the right words to um, to care for each other's vulnerable parts of self, and to try to present the thing in which you're seeing with as much gentleness as possible. And that's hard for all of us, isn't it? Sometimes
Mm,
the the less conscious parts of me hurt my partner, and then
mm,
she will respond with a level of hurt. It's hard to always be, well, we're not. A lot of work you do in a messy way. Um, but yeah, we're very lucky. As I said, we have a good respect for each other. Like I know that she sees in ways in which I struggle to, and um,
mm.
and if I know that I need to stop sometimes when I'm challenged by the things in which she's pointing out, and to sit with them and give them the space that they deserve. To that yeah. So it's relationships are challenging, but yeah, we're very lucky to have met each other, and we do it pretty well, I reckon.
Exceptionally well, and I know from personal experience being in conversation with her that she feels the same way. One of the many pieces of wisdom that she has shared from you
Yeah.
is Pete says, "It's not a problem, it's a puzzle." So I wanna make sure I share that with you, dear listeners, because it's really been life-changing for me. So where did that come from
um,
in you? That
well,
ability to hold the world in that way?
yeah, well, I think if sometimes life presents us with scenario after scenario after scenario that becomes overwhelming. And if you get a series of circumstances that really knock you down, um, and if they're close together, that overwhelm can be with us for quite a period of time. And anything that's with us for a period of time, we develop habits around it. And so
Mm,
if we're going through a period in our lives when there's a lot of overwhelming circumstances, once those overwhelming circumstances actually start to soften, our brain is used to seeing the places where there's constant issues going on. And we can say, oh, there's another thing going on, and then there's another thing. And yeah, where we can hardwire ourselves to see the little complexities that present themselves in our everyday life as problem after problem after problem, and that creates cortisol hit after cortisol hit after cortisol hit, um, and where there's a part of our psyche that can be waiting for a moment in the future where there's no problems, when things are actually going to settle. But again, going back to that somatics sense, is if there's no one who is relaxing the body consciously, if there's no one home behind the wheel, if we're leaving it to autopilot, the autopilot is just constantly doing this when they're suddenly you look in the fridge and there's no cheese, or oh shit, we didn't do the shopping for the fruit or whatever, and the body goes like that, and it's like, oh no, and so our body learns to react like that. And so the reframing, which is, right, so these are the puzzles for today, and that nature is constantly throwing us little puzzles that are requiring our attention to work out. And for me, that reframing is helpful. It's like, okay, right, so there's nothing there in the fridge, so what are we doing for the kids' lunch? Okay, well, that means I'm going to have to do this, this, and this. But if it's, if I'm not careful, then that's going to create a stress, and overwhelm, a cortisol response. And now I've got stress running through, and I'm just like, I'm not embodied, I'm disembodied, and I'm shorter with the kids. And I start to move faster and less grounded. And I change the whole environment in the house. And then the kids can become agitated, and they're like, oh my god, this is a problem, there's no fruit in the house. So yeah.
Oh gosh, again, I could talk to you about all of this all day long. I always close every episode with the same question, and I'm going to ask it to you. When you have a dream in your heart and you don't feel like you have what it takes to make it happen, what do you say to yourself? Or what would you say to a client?
When you have a dream in your heart and you're not sure,
And you don't feel like you have what it takes to make it happen. It's not possible that I could do that.
hmm, yeah, I say, okay, slow down. I know those stories. They're old stories, Pete. Just take it one step at a time. You don't have to be, you don't need to be overtaken by that. Let's just slow it down. Yeah, that's kind of, it's something like that. There's something around it. And for me these days, um, there's more yeah, there's more breath. Um,
Mm.
I'm trying to spend more time caring for my body than trying to solve reality in my mind.
Oh,
Um,
gosh, I
and so
love that.
when I'm caring for my body, I notice that I'm calm, and then I can step forward, and yeah, I see. So yeah, when I'm seeing an intrusive thought or a thought that's restrictive, so I say, oh, right, that's a restrictive thought. Okay, so if it's restrictive, where's the tension? Okay, right, it's all through my shoulders. All right, there's like all of this anxiety through my chest. So instead of trying to find a narrative that's like, I can do this, I can, I'm trying, and to be authentic. I'm not saying I do this great all the time. This is a deep work in progress and process. But that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to have a physical response to problem solving, as opposed to trying to solve it intellectually, and then to
Mm.
do. So to breathe is to do, and then to act. Where yeah, yeah, yeah. That's how I'd answer that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the way that you show up in the world. I'm so grateful to have you in my life.
This is a yeah. Thanks for letting me talk. Yeah, it's nice. It's been nice. Yeah, I do a lot of listening, and I do talk in my sessions, but it's nice to have someone ask me the questions. That's been lovely.
Oh, gosh, such a pleasure. And I will keep asking them. Thank you again. Oh, I feel like a plant that's been watered. I love framing the practice of living as an exercise in listening with our whole being, and that it takes training, and the power of somatics to sit with yourself, ask questions, and listen with your body, not just your mind that's constructing narratives to justify your experiences. And they're just breathing invites conscious participation to cultivate that relationship with your body. I loved when he said, I spend more time caring for my body than trying to solve reality in my mind. And he shepherds this practice so beautifully when you're in session with him. And being aware of your internal myths, that we develop habits around those stories, that when we consciously participate with our body, we can get off autopilot. And the beauty of building trust and respecting our own boundaries and those of others, that when our relationship with our body matures, we can learn to notice and respect when our body isn't ready. And the value of observing and exploring yourself with gentle curiosity rather than judgment or shame. That it's not a problem, it's a puzzle. And that once we're able to observe ourselves in this way, we can expand the dialogue with which we use to interact with ourselves. And acknowledging all of our emotions and giving them a seat at the table. Isn't that a beautiful image? That when we move into that place of intimacy with tension and dis-ease, and we inquire more deeply into those emotions we're rubbing up against, there's a familiarity and acceptance of states that may be part of our experiences and the landscape that is within us. and viewing big changes as sacred rites of passage, as invitations to connect with a deeper strength and resilience, and changing the relationship with grief, that it's meticulous in its work, but the loss is also a death of ourself within the landscape of that world. And acknowledging that the sacred spaces of grief can stretch us and break us open, but that we're not broken, and that the break allows us to understand and grow and build those sacred scars and honor them. And acknowledging our genetically inherited personality traits, thinking of our internal landscape as a garden that we're the custodians of, that is much older than us. And that when we embrace that perspective, we have an opportunity to care for the internal landscape and the garden, improve it, and leave it better than when we received it. And I love the way he talks about relationship dynamics, that being in a relationship is a collision of stories, often from the past. And the value of taking responsibility for what is yours, being aware of how your past is informing, how you're translating things in the present, can lead to better conflict resolution. When he was talking about the pitfalls of the deification of a romantic partner, I thought, oh gosh, I've fallen into that trap many, many times. And I found it so beautiful when he was talking about the sacred gift of your heart, that you're handing access to the places of yourself in which you hide from the world, that you're letting your partner into the most sacred part of you with which you're yet to understand and integrate, the place that overwhelms and confuses you. That when we share our trauma and we receive it from our partner, we need to hold this place with care and resist the urge to weaponize it. But also, when we give each other our humanity and those parts that cause mischief, it's a gift of a different and valuable perspective. That being in a healthy relationship is not the absence of conflict. It's about giving the conflict the space it deserves, owning your part in it, seeking repair, and trusting that your partner has something to offer that can help you be a better person. That we have the obligation to find the right words and to care for each other's vulnerable parts and to be present in the conflict and make sure that you're seeing with as much gentleness as possible. He's a really beautiful couples counselor. So if you live in Melbourne or you're going to be in town, do not miss the opportunity to be in session with him and experience the incredible way that he's able to move you and open you up. It's really, I wish I had the words to describe it. So I'm really interested to hear what resonated with you from this episode. So please leave a review or a post in the Facebook group, and you can connect with Pete at elkandme.com.au. I want to hear about your It Has to Be Me story. So head on over to ithastobeme.com/stories to share it in our free community. You can also join the conversations we're having about this episode and others. I'm Tess Masters. Join me next week and we'll dive inside another great story to help us go from dreaming to doing.